Coming up next, the Flintstones meet the Jetsons.
Uh-oh, I smell another cheap cartoon crossover.
Bart Simpson, meet Jay Sherman the Critic.
The world of animation is a collaborative one. No one animated project can be done by one individual. It involves a team of writers, artists, and voice actors, and in no other form can this be expected than in cartoon crossovers. These episodes can act as a sort of magnum opus of sorts, showing the many ways different series can exist in each other's universe. So that's what we'll be counting on today, the top 6 cartoon crossovers. But since this is a list on cartoon crossovers, it would make sense to make this video a crossover of its own. So introducing Mr. Manuel D.
Oh hey GeekToons, how's it going? Wait, why am I on your channel? Is this a crossover episode?
Now for this list, we're going to be looking at the types of crossovers that fully take advantage of the worlds colliding. My only rule is that the crossover can't just be a 5-second joke in a random episode. These have to be the characters actually interacting with one another. So with that all said, let's get on with the top 6 cartoon crossovers.
Scooby Natural. Scooby Natural is a crossover between the live-action CW drama Supernatural and the long-running cartoon franchise that features a Great Dane. The episode is about monster hunters and brothers Sam and Dean Winchester, who get sucked into Dean's favorite episode of Scooby-Doo Where Are You, titled A Night of Fright is No Delight. This happens after they are given a free TV by the owner of a pawn shop after fighting a plush dinosaur. What's great about this episode is that it's mostly animated, with the live-action bits only occurring in the beginning and in the end. In the episode, Sam and Dean meet the Mystery Gang. Dean is really excited to meet the Scooby Gang because it's obviously his favorite cartoon. He's also interested in hooking up with Daphne, because why not? Sam, on the other hand, is aware of Scooby-Doo and finds it weird that he's trapped in a cartoon featuring a talking dog. Dean notices the episode seems to be going as planned, with Scooby-Doo getting a mansion from an eccentric millionaire called Hubert Sanders, but after that, Dean notices that the characters are actually being murdered. Like any rational person will react when somebody dies, this shocks the Scooby Gang, who are used to the monsters being fake. Now, what's fun about this episode is how Sam and Dean actually have to educate the Scooby Gang in how to kill ghosts. Definitely one of the highlights for me in this episode is when the gang has a nervous breakdown because somebody died. That's pretty funny, not gonna lie. Which leads to Sam and Dean opening their trunk in their Impala and showing the gang their weapons. To be honest, at first when I saw this episode, I thought that this episode would take a dark tone. But in the end, it actually ended up being emotional, with it revealed that the ghost is actually a child who was tied to a knife trapped in the TV. The child disguised himself as a human to trick the gang, thinking that the ghost was fake. Oh yeah, also in the episode, Velma kisses Sam, which makes Dean jealous because, you know, he would have actually landed her, but he didn't really think about it, because he's dumb. So the episode ends with the TV being broken, and the pocket knife of the kid, Spirit, is tied to being destroyed. Oh yeah, the owner of the pawn shop, yeah, he gets arrested, which leads to him saying the classic Scooby-Doo line, "I would have gone away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids," which leads to Dean saying Scooby-Dooby-Doo to Sam's disappointment. In the end, this crossover is great, and I'm super glad it exists. It was from season 13 of Supernatural. While the show has been running for quite a long time, and it was supposed to end originally at season 5, I'm glad that this great show kept airing, or else this crossover would have never been made. And to me, out of all the crossovers this show has had, Scooby Natural is definitely one of the weirdest. Yep, even weirder than him meeting John Cena. Remember that? How about we don't? But to conclude, it's a funny episode that satirizes the long-running cartoon very well, while also telling a compelling story featuring the Winchester boys. It's also better than Scoob.
Did you just get beat by a microvan?
The light was red! The light... Red!
The Grim Adventures of the K&D. It's amazing how many similarities can be found between the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and K&D. I mean, think about it. Both series were created in the early to mid-2000s era of Cartoon Network, and both were results of the Cartoon Network's Big Pick event. And with the creators being good friends, of course, there will be a crossover of epic proportions in the form of the Grim Adventures of the K&D. The story for this crossover is that Billy rips the back of his dad's lucky pants after he was specifically told not to, so he enlists the help of the K&D to help him out. Well, actually at first he calls the Ed Boys, but after being told that he's broke, they politely redirect him to the kids next door. After Sector V show up, they decide to take Billy over to the moon base to get the pants off, while number 1 goes undercover disguised as Billy. But unfortunately for number 1, he wasn't aware that Mandy existed, who tortures him until he tells her where the others were. Meanwhile, Billy unknowingly thinks the contraption built by the delightful children from down the lane is a bathroom, when in reality it's a machine that fuses all evil. And so it fuses Billy, the delightful children, and Grimm's scythe, and therefore becomes a massive entity of evil. Meanwhile, Mandy somehow manages to find the moon base and convince Sector V that she is number 1, even with number 5 not believing her. After that, number 1 and Grimm make it to the moon base only to find out that Mandy is off to take out Billy in her own mecha, when in reality, she actually wants to fuse with the scythe to become all-powerful. But suddenly, Grimm and number 1 show up as this sort of bone mecha of sorts, and with help from Billy's dad, manage to defeat the delightful Reaper. Overall, this crossover is really fun. It's really entertaining seeing the characters interact with each other.
Hey, where's number 1?
Right here! And there's going to be some changes around here. I don't have that. Oh, no. I was just kidding. Oh, no.
Ben 10 Generator, Rex Heroes United. Now compared to the Grim Adventures of the K&D, this crossover is a little bit different, since both Ben 10 and Generator Rex were created by the Main of Action Studios. But sadly, both these shows would go on to lead different destinies, where one was super popular, spanning multiple incarnations, and the other, while having a receiving dedicated fanbase, kinda died. But in my opinion, I still think this crossover is really fun. The episode starts off with Rex jumping into the battle after he's notified of an EOV attack second prior. It's here where he sees Ben 10 transform into Humongosaurus as the two fight. Meanwhile, another EOV-absorbing creature jumps into the same portal Ben came out of, and it's revealed here that this is the Alpha, capable of evolving into absorbing natives of human life form. These two end up joining forces to take down the Alpha together. The Alpha ends up absorbing Ben's Ulnatrix, which leads them to can now transform into Ben's aliens. Later on in the episode, Alpha manages to get Omega Knight in Rex, but with the help of Upgrade, both Rex and Ben manage to pound the Alpha into submission and destroying the Omega Nanite from the inside. The episode ends with Rex and Ben saying goodbye, and helping Ben into the same portal effectively returns him home. All in all, this crossover shows the chemistry between both properties. Both Ben and Rex seem some great scenes, especially with their origin story. Okay, I can't handle it. I can't believe Ben 10 and Generator Rex beat up Alpha J Show.
You really haven't heard of me? I'm Ben Tennyson. Row, fight the power.
Crossover Nexus. When it comes to cartoon crossovers, this is pretty much one of the most confusing when it premiered. Back when it happened, hundreds if not thousands of fans were against it. Why? Because it had 4 characters that were unlikely to cross over under any circumstances. But in the end, Crossover Nexus is an end product that more than likely speaks for itself. The story starts in a destroyed city, where 2 shadowed figures are being attacked by a villain named Strike. Fed up by their hiding, he summons KO to eliminate instead. Just as he's about to destroy him, one of the shadowed heroes save him, revealing herself to be Garnet. The other shadowed hero is Ben, and they run. Strike sends his blaster after them. After brief introductions, the blaster engages them. Ben turns into forearms and pushes it back. The blaster retaliates by blasting off his Omnitrix, preventing him from turning back. Garnet also loses her visor, which enabled her to focus her future vision. The 3 escape and manage to temporarily bring down the blaster. Escaping into an abandoned building, they find numerous other heroes they've never seen, encased in stone with red X's on them. They do find one hero named Raven, who managed to survive Strike's attack due to a protection spell. She explains that the city they're in used to be a bustling utopia for all sorts of heroes until Strike showed up to destroy them all, stealing their powers. He then began summoning heroes to destroy from other dimensions, which he does with ease. Raven has also lost most of her powers, only being able to levitate, before decide to attack Strike's lair head-on, even forming their team name, OK, Ben, Let's Go Universe, along the way. Using Raven's levitation with Garnet and KO's punches, they evade traps and monsters sent by Strike and make it to his lair. The Medusa cannon shows up once more and corners them. Strike arrives and begins powering up. KO uses this opportunity to grab the Medusa cannon, figuring that its appearance as a pen indicates that it could create as well as destroy. KO restores his new friend's powers and they engage Strike. He sends X energy blasts down that Garnet deflects with rapid fire gauntlet strikes and future vision, while Raven uses a blast of dark energy. When Ben tries to change, he only changes into two of the various heroes he saw before. KO explains that he used the Medusa cannon to restore the Omnitrix. The powers that Strike had stolen came with it. KO then uses a power fist to launch Ben at the stunned Strike. Ben then transforms into many heroes as he delivers a devastating final hit, destroying Strike. Garnet reprograms the blaster and the city, as well as all the heroes is restored by it. Raven opens portals to their home dimensions, and Ben and Raven both depart. Before Garnet leaves, she uses the blaster to create a power card of herself for KO, and leaves for her home dimension. KO returns to his home and wakes up in Gar's bodega, initially believing that he was dreaming. He then discovers the Garnet power card, realizing that the recent events were true. Overall, Crossover Nexus was unexpectedly a fun time, with all the references to late 90s and early 2000s Cartoon Network that could make any fanboy or girl blush.
Oh, what happened? Did I just fall asleep? I hope Mr. Garden see. Huh? Wow.
On May 7th, 2004, we would be introduced to one of the best crossovers in television history. A crossover of pure fan service that brings two series that we would have never expected to come together, but we're glad it did. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot talk about cartoon crossovers without talking about the one, the only, the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour. Realizing that he is unprepared for his science project, Timmy wishes for the greatest lab in Dimmsdale, but he ends up in AJ's lab. And he can't just use AJ's lab because obviously he'll suspect Timmy's using his technology. So, Timmy, taking with him a magic auto poofer that poofs him back to his bedroom, he wishes himself to the greatest lab in the universe. And he's transported into Jimmy Neutron's lab in the city of Retroville. Timmy, now creepily animated in CGI, begins fiddling with the inventions stored here. Shortly after that, Jimmy confronts Timmy and accidentally activates the auto poofer that sends himself back to Dimmsdale. Exploring the lab, Timmy finds Jimmy's robotic dog Goddard in the middle of an automatic tune-up, and mistaking him for a video game system, he foolishly downloads a video game decimator into Goddard's hard drive. Shortly after, Timmy meets Jimmy's friends Cold and Sheen, and the two use the absence of Jimmy to play with the unguarded inventions. After that, Jimmy's mom comes in and mistakenly thinks that Timmy is actually Jimmy, and grounds him after Timmy talks back to her. But moments after, Timmy then uses Jimmy's hypnotizing device to think that Jimmy's mom is actually the Mighty Mom. Stealing the rocket-powered skateboard, Timmy rockets himself across the town and crashes into Cindy Vortex, who, thinking Timmy is actually a genius like Jimmy, falls for him. And after that, the two then go try out all of Jimmy's inventions. Meanwhile, the Decimator video game finished downloading and transforms Goddard into the titled character. Shortly after, Goddard escapes the lab and starts chasing Jimmy's dad. Meanwhile, Jimmy meets Cosmo and Wanda and believes they're holographic supercomputers. The town mistakes Jimmy for Timmy since Timmy uses outlandish disguise to escape responsibilities. Jimmy goes to Dimmsdale Elementary School and brags of Jimmy's auto poofer as a scientific teleportation pen. Seeing this, Mr. Crocker recognizes it as a magical item and chases Jimmy back to Timmy's room. Realizing the auto poofer limitations, Jimmy combines it with a game buddy and invents a true teleportation device that can take him back to Retroville. But before Jimmy has a chance to use it, Crocker steals it and uses it to transport himself to Fairy World. Back in Retroville, Cindy and Timmy are actually on a date in the candy bar, but shortly after, Carl, Sheen, and Libby are trying to warn Timmy and Cindy that Goddard had been transformed into the love child between Godzilla and the Iron Giant. But here's the thing, Timmy and Cindy don't listen and then they proceed to finish their date. So the guys are actually now deciding to stop Goddard, but they are unsuccessful and Goddard becomes even bigger and chases after the kids. Back to Timmy and Cindy on their date, and and Timmy asks Cindy if she liked him if he wasn't a genius. Cindy obviously answers no. Once again, Carl, Sheen, and Libby run to Timmy and warn him that Goddard is after them, but Timmy still doesn't care and thinks it's not a big deal, and they continue their date. Shortly a couple of seconds later, Goddard arrives and shoots the kids with flames. Don't worry, they remain unharmed. Timmy, now finally getting his face out of his ass, now sees that the game is really getting out of control. He tries to get home and calls Cosmo Wanda for help, but instead he gets eaten by Goddard. Then Cindy tells him to get into Goddard's central core to deactivate him. Back outside, Goddard targets the purple Flurp factory and decides to destroy it. Libby tells everyone that if he destroys the factory, then there will be a major Flurp spill which could dissolve all Retroville. Libby calls Cindy and Timmy to warn them. Realizing that they have no time to get to the core, Cindy figures out that if Timmy disconnects the game overdrive, the game will shut down and Goddard will be deactivated. Cindy guides Timmy towards the disk drive and he arrives, just as Goddard is about to destroy the town with his rockets. However, the laser pen runs out of power, so Timmy has to use his teeth to bite through the system and shut the game down. Wow, Timmy's giant ass teeth actually work for something in his life. Cindy arrives in Jimmy's hovercrafts and believes that Timmy actually created the disaster on purpose, and that giving her an opportunity to kiss Timmy. Just then, Goddard shrinks back to normal, and with him being back to normal, Jimmy makes contact with his friends and informs Timmy that Crocker is in fairy role. While Jimmy and Timmy have an argument, Crocker escapes from Jimmy and takes a tour, learning that the fairy armory houses a number of magical weapons, which Crocker poofs into and steals. Powered by magic, Crocker destroys the big one and leaves the fairy powerless, and turns Jorgen into a dog. Why a dog? I have no idea. Thinking the fairies aren't real, Jimmy retrieves the teleporter from Crocker, but nearly leaves the fairies behind. But Timmy uses Goddard to help Jimmy understand what fairies really mean to him, and so Jimmy understands and decides to stay. Returning back to the school, Jimmy combines all the science fair entries and turns them into a giant robot, which Cosmo and Wanda use to distract Crocker, while Jimmy uses the armory to return power to the big wand. Crocker is also drained from his armory, and Jorgen erases Crocker's memories by attacking him. With the fairy's magic restored, Timmy wishes that these two return back to their home, and the two shake hands and make amends. Cindy tells Timmy that she'll never forget him, but Jimmy tells her to get out of his lab. Back home, Timmy realizes that he never found time to finish his science fair project. On the verge of being disqualified, Jimmy perfects the teleporter and sends Goddard to Dimsdale. Timmy wins the science fair and thanks Jimmy for his help. Cindy notices Timmy on the screen and wants to talk to him, but in the end, Jimmy yells at her to get out of his lab. In the end of the day, this crossover is great. It definitely falls into the category of we never wanted, but we're definitely glad it exists. And not only was it really good, but it was so good that it actually had 2 more crossovers. And those were great too, but come on, let's face it, nothing beats the original.
Jimmy Neutron, boy genius. Timmy Turner, boy!
But before we get to number 1, here are a few of the honorable mentions. CN City. Not really a crossover, but a really good example of bringing animated characters together with all the creative scenarios that they could possibly put. So this definitely gets an honorary number 7 spot. Steven Universe, Say Uncle. While a lot of people despise this episode, I actually feel like it's a pretty serviceable episode in terms of Steven Universe. Plus, it's from the first season, so at least for me, it's not as bad as other reviewers claim it to be. Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law. Being one of Adult Swim's earliest series, it's really creative. The different ways it can integrate old Hanna-Barbera characters. I mean, where else can you find Shaggy and Scooby being arrested for drug possession? And with all that said, on to number 1. A Star is Burns. The long-running Simpsons aren't strangers to crossovers. They've already done a few with other franchises such as The X-Files, Futurama, and even Family Guy. But for me, the best crossover has to be the first one they ever did, the episode A Star is Burns. The plot for the episode starts after Kent Brockman broadcasts a story about a national survey ranking Springfield as the crappiest city in America. A town meeting is held to try and find a way to raise tourism. Bart takes the opportunity to trick the entire people by looking at photos of his backside. But after a few different ideas, the town adopts Marge's proposal to launch a film festival to boost Springfield's image, and Marge is placed on a panel to judge each short film produced by the townspeople. Also on the panel is New York City movie critic Jay Sherman, the host of a cable movie review show called Coming Attractions. Sherman's stay at the Simpsons house creates some difficulties in the household, as Sherman proves to be able to outbelch Homer, and he begins to suspect no one in his family really respects him or his intelligence. When Homer confides his concern to Marge, she tries to reassure him that they do respect him. However, she admits that it is Homer's obnoxious and crude behavior behavior that no one respects. This was evident earlier when Marge caught Homer red-handed getting Sherman in trouble with Patty and Selma by tricking him into giving bad comments about their favorite television series, MacGyver. She reveals when her sisters learned that Jay was tricked by him, they were further enraged by that. Unconvinced by it, Homer persuades her to put him on the festival's judging panel in an attempt to prove himself to others that he is more than just an unintelligent, obnoxious, and crude ape. Reluctantly, Marge gives him a place on the judges' panel in place of Martin Scorsese. Meanwhile, when Mr. Burns learns that his profits have dropped due to his bad image, Smithers informs him of the film festival, and Burns chooses that he needs to do an epic biographical film that will endear him to the people. Since Steven Spielberg's unavailable, Mr. Burns hires Steven Spielberg's non-union Mexican equivalent, Senor Spielbergo, to direct, planning to play himself in the film after the auditions to have an actor portray him all fail. On the night of the festival, the films are shown. Apu's Bright Lights, Beef Jerky, Moe's musical number Mo Better Booze, Bart's The Eternal Struggle, Ned Flanders' film about Moses, and Hans Moleman, Man Getting Hit by Football, which only features Moleman getting hit in the groin by a football. His film makes Homer laugh, but Marge is displeased with him when she hears Homer announce that Moleman should get the grand prize. Marge and Jay remind him that it's not America's Funniest Home Videos, and that Homer can't quickly judge on one movie. Festival attendees are particularly touched by Barney's artistic introspective film about alcoholism, Pocahontas, which Jay foresees to be the eventual winner. Mr. Burns' film A Burns for All Seasons is screened last, and is met with negative audience reaction, calling it as nothing more than poorly made and purely ego-driven to try and portray him in a more positive light. The attendees jeered Burns for it. In the judges' room, Mayor Quimby and Krusty the Clown support Burns' film, which Jay questions why. It turns out that they were bribed with money by Burns himself out of their own egos. Jay and Marge honestly support Barney's touching film, Pocahontas. The tie is left for Homer to break, and he enthusiastically votes for Hans Moleman's film Man Getting Hit by Football, which he found to be hysterically funny, much to everyone's detest. Outside, Marge has a discussion with Homer and expresses her disappointment with him voting incorrectly. He tries to defend himself, but Jay points out that there are some matters in life that are more important than seeing a man getting hit in the groin with a football. Finally convinced to change his vote, Homer asks Marge to let him view the two movies again in private. In serious thought, he rewatches the movies of Mole Man and Barney. Barney's movie had heart, and Football in the Groin had a football in the groin. Homer finally votes for Barney's movie. After being announced as the winner, Barney declares that he'll be clean and sober. That is until his prize is revealed to be, ironically enough, a lifetime supply of Duff beer. Marge tells Homer that she's so proud of him for choosing the right film, while Burns sits in his seat in disgust and being a sore loser in the process. The scene then shifts to 6 months later at the Academy Awards, when Burns' film has been nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor. Burns feels he's sure to win, having bribed everyone in Hollywood. However, his hopes are dashed when the winner turns out to be George C. Scott starring in a remake of Hans Moleman's Man Getting Hit by Football, angering him once more. Overall, this is a type of episode that truly grasps the concept of a cartoon crossover. It doesn't only act as a ploy by executives to make a quick buck, but rather, it acts as a love letter of sorts to the properties crossing over, with respect to the source material from both ends.
Goodbye, Mr. Sherman. If I ever play Carnegie Hall, I'll give you a call.
And if you ever want to visit my show...
Nah, we're not gonna be doing that.
Oh no, GeekToons lost connection. Looks like there's not gonna be a GeekToons Recommends. But not to worry, young viewer, I guess, I don't know your age. But now there's Manuel Recommends, where I recommend channels that I like, that you should watch, whenever. The first YouTuber that I want to talk about is a YouTuber called Ted's Attic, and the fact that he only has 300 subscribers absolutely baffles me. He's criminally underrated. He makes commentary videos, and his editing is absolutely incredible. If you're not subscribed to him, go subscribe to him. He's amazing. The next YouTuber I'm going to talk about is another YouTuber called A.S.K, who makes mostly videos talking about Discord and stuff, but he's starting to talk about more animated stuff. He's criminally underrated, and he's also the guy who makes some of my thumbnails sometimes. He's a great dude, and I love his editing, so go check him out. He's really funny. And finally, this might not be a YouTuber to say, but he is criminally underrated, and everyone should go check him out and follow him on Twitter and on YouTube. And his name is Joe. His editing is absolutely incredible, and he's also a really good friend of mine. He is really chill. So go check all these people out if you can.